people think that goes away in April with the heat.
Hello, welcome to a special edition of Planet America with a wrap of today's first presidential debate. I'm John Barron.
I'm Chaz Licciardello.
What are we going to call this? The show in Ohio?
The cluster in Cleveland, John.
Done. It was certainly a chaotic affair. We'll bring you all the major moments and some expert analysis of today's out-of-control slugfest.
And we're going to check the week's other big stories, including taxing times for Donald Trump and the latest on the Supreme Court fight. But first...
This was always going to be a rather different presidential debate. Nobody was really expecting a rerun of Lincoln Douglas, not after Trump started demanding both candidates pee in a cup first.
I will strongly be demanding a drug test of Sleepy Joe Biden.
And then today, the Trump campaign wanted somebody to check Biden's ears for electronic devices or transmitters. Vice President Biden declined that invitation. For the first 5 minutes, though, of this debate today, Chaz, it was almost boring. It was very sedate, quite disappointing for media arguments over the Supreme Court. Then Trump started trying to put Biden off his game by interjecting, ignoring the rules of the debate, tangling with the moderator, Chris Wallace, who ended up sounding more like an exasperated substitute teacher than a moderator.
Not what you've said,
But
and it's not what your party has said.
That is simply
Your party
a lie.
doesn't say. I
give
got
you
rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a
That is
big
not a
chunk of
comprehensive
That
plan.
is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obama.
Let me ask my
Well,
question.
I'll ask Joe. $1 billion if you
that
get rid of
is
the
absolutely
you know what,
not
stop.
true.
You're doing it.
You're going to
Not
have
true.
Gentlemen.
And it wasn't just Trump. Joe Biden got a little bit chippy himself, maybe trying to take on Trump at his own game. He hurled a few insults the president's way.
Everything he's saying so far is simply a lie.
Folks, absolutely agree.
Folks, do you have any idea what this clown's doing? Will you shut up, man?
Listen,
And just to make sure this is totally schoolyard stuff, Trump had some insults of his own. Clearly, he watched that old YouTube clip of Biden getting shirty in 1987 with Frank the voter, who questioned him about his IQ and his education. He went there.
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
But throughout it all, it seemed that Joe Biden had a pretty clear tactic for trying to deal with Trump's antics and chaos. Turn to the camera and talk directly to the folks at home.
You folks at home, how many of you got up this morning and had an empty chair at the kitchen table because someone died of COVID? Do you believe for a moment what he's telling you in light of all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID? But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, the American people, he doesn't, that's not true. It doesn't want to talk about what you need.
That tactic kind of achieved what Trump wanted, I think. He wanted to throw Biden off his game, and it actually worked. I mean, for example, this moment coming up was shaping up to be Biden's strongest moment of the debate, I thought. It was Biden's version of the, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Had that canned feel to it.
Exactly. It was coming. He had momentum, and then in came Trump.
Looking at both your records, why should voters elect you president as opposed to President Trump? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did. We left him a booming economy, and he caused the recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head-to-head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Your son got $3.5 million.
And by the way, my son...
Wait a minute. Mr. President, your campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted.
And then just like that, the moment was lost. Biden was less fluent afterwards. He lost his momentum. Mission accomplished from Trump. The problem for Trump was he was so busy trying to step all over Biden's points, he never actually built any moments of his own. For example, Chris Wallace asked Biden about whether he'd commit to not packing the Supreme Court if he became president. Biden, as per usual, completely avoided the question. Trump was onto him immediately. He pointed that out, that Biden wasn't answering the question. Biden was struggling, but then Trump overreached and it became a mess again.
Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now.
Are you going to pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't want
you're a
to answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question is the question is
radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
Right, gentlemen, I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
We're not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it?
Now, look, I get that Trump was desperately trying to get that talking point in about Hunter Biden supposedly taking $3.5 million from the Moscow mayor's wife, and he was injecting it all over the debate, like about 20 times. But the fact is, if Trump had just made his point and then shut up, that was shaping up to become one of those moments that gets replayed. The conservative press would have jumped onto it. The mainstream press, I think, would have jumped onto it as well. It would have gathered a life of its own. But now it's just one more example of a messy debate.
Yeah, well, as for what, if anything, truly newsworthy in all of that came through, Chris Wallace did ask Trump if he would condemn racist right-wing militia groups, and Trump did not.
Supremacists
Who
and
would
white
you like me to condemn?
supremacists and right-wing
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
And those words, stand back and stand by, had a pretty ominous sound to them that could echo for a while, I think, Chaz. President Trump's attacks on the integrity of the election itself, he amped that up even further. You know, when you're Trump, you can either double down or back down. Well, he never backs down. He doubled down. And that was pretty remarkable. And when the two concepts are linked, right-wing militia violence and then refusing to accept the result of the election, that is a real concern, and that should be a massive story that any president of the United States would be that irresponsible to be fanning those flames. But, you know, in the era of Trump, it's just like, yeah, he does that.
Yeah, and it was so easy for him to avoid as well, but he never does. Look, I was trying very hard to find anything of substance that survived that wood chipper. And there wasn't much. Biden dealt with Trump's main critique of him, that he didn't stand up for law and order. He repeatedly said supportive things about good cops, but that he was just asking for accountability for the bad apples, etc. He turned the suburbs under attack line right back on Trump.
If he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone, and you would see problems like you've never seen.
He wouldn't know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
He would not.
So much
I was
better.
raised,
Go ahead, wait a minute.
I was raised in the suburbs. This is not 1950. All these dog whistles and racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment. They're being flooded. They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
Biden, he did make a few decent points about COVID. Like the little moments where, for instance, he threw back at Trump's face some of the things that Trump had said in April and March and say, oh, well, how about now? But for Trump, he just didn't have any sustained moments. Like even when given 2 minutes to answer questions, he flitted around in a haphazard way. He'd make unrelated points, just string them together.
His 2-minute answers went about a minute to a minute and a half, which in traditional debates, you use every second down to the second. You have a 2-minute answer ready to go, but Trump's just riffing.
Well, there were 5 15-second answers thrown together. It was a real ADD performance, I thought.
Well, as for who won or who lost, apart from, Vladimir Putin, who knows? A CBS YouGov poll of debate watchers gave it to Biden in the minutes after the debate, 48-41, which is almost exactly correlating to national polls right now. So that's probably just a voting intention poll. There's a real Rorschach test of an exercise, probably. History does show, though, that the results of who people think won can change over the next few days depending on the media narrative. So famously, back in 1976, first debate between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, right after the debate itself, viewers said it was a draw between the two of them. They both did fine. Then reporters latched on to what was a pretty major gaffe from Gerry Ford about saying that the Soviet Union won't dominate Eastern Europe, and people said, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. 48 hours later, and suddenly a 20-point margin was saying Jimmy Carter is the winner. Big difference now is the media is also highly, highly partisan, so you're going to believe the media narrative you're fed based on who you decided to watch.
Yeah, look, my bottom line is Biden wasn't good. Like, he's frequently unclear. He misspoke a lot. At one point, he was arguing that Trump was at fault for shutting down the economy when the scientists that Biden says that he supports were saying he should have shut the economy earlier. So, like, he didn't make a lot of sense, but it didn't matter in the end. As far as I was concerned, this was 1980 all over again, where you had the country's in a mess like it was in 1980, and Jimmy Carter, the sitting president, was saying, my challenger is just unelectable because he's just nuts. That was Ronald Reagan at the time. Now Trump's saying Biden's unelectable because he's senile, and all Ronald Reagan had to do was just be normal and reassure people. And that's all Biden had to do. And I feel like he did it. He was very unimpressive, but he wasn't senile. And as far as Biden had to show that people are worse off now than they were 4 years ago. After watching that debate, I felt like I was worse off than I've ever been in my life. So mission accomplished there. Yeah. There are no highlights. They're not going to play any clips from that, apart from maybe the white supremacy one.
Yeah.
So I don't see the media's role in this. I just think, bottom line, Trump's 7.5 points down with 5 weeks to go.
Yeah.
And the debate is a nil or draw, but he lost the opportunity. And that's what matters.
Yeah, and look, it's tempting to say that Trump, being this great distractor, a sideshow barker, works better when he's in front, as it did in the Republican primaries. But, he was pretty crazy in those debates against Hillary Clinton in 2016 as well. And he was behind at that stage, but somehow managed to come in over the top. Now, that wasn't down to his debate performances as such. There are a lot of external and other complications as to why that race shifted late. But, I don't see anything in this debate that disqualifies Joe Biden. It wasn't a solid performance, not a particularly solid performance. It was okay, I guess. Trump was Trump, but ultimately there are so few minds to be made up in all of this. I don't see it moving the needle more than 1 or 2 points either way. And yes, we could get a late rush as we did in 1980, where people simply say, you know what, I'm tired of this. Let's time for a change. Let's try something else. But let's get some more reaction for you now from Lan Hee Chen. He has been an advisor to at least 4 Republican presidential campaigns. He was Mitt Romney's policy director in 2012, which had him heavily involved in debate prep against Barack Obama. He also helped prep Marco Rubio to debate against Donald Trump during the 2016 primaries, although that didn't go so well. Lan Hee Chen, welcome back to Planet America.
Thanks for having me.
So you have been in the business of prepping a candidate to debate against Donald Trump. That led to a discussion about penises, as I recall. How do you think Joe Biden did?
Well, look, I thought he did fine under the circumstances. I thought he appeared credible. And the reality is the bar for him tonight wasn't all that high. In part, the bar was set by President Trump. Essentially, if he didn't come out in a nightgown, he was going to be fine. And so, he sort of came out, I thought, gave a credible performance. I thought it was a fine evening for Joe Biden.
Now, Trump clearly came in with a plan to throw Biden off his rhythm. Do you think it was a good plan?
It's the only kind of debate that Donald Trump knows how to perform in. I think he's comfortable when he's pugilistic. He's comfortable when he's attacking. He's comfortable when he's mixing it up. So in that sense, I don't know that he knocked Biden off his stride so much as that it was impossible to get into any kind of stride at any point because you were constantly being interrupted. You were constantly having to figure out how you wanted to respond to various things here and there. So I think in terms of game plan, actually, the president executed the game plan he wanted to. I don't think tonight's debate changed any minds. And in that sense, maybe it was a problem for the president that it didn't.
Now, conventional wisdom suggests that the effect of debates is usually generated by the moments that the media talks about. As someone who prepped other people for debates, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's the media, but I also think it's each campaign. When I was in this business, you would work to sort of spin the media, to make sure they saw things your way, to highlight moments of the debate that you thought were best for your candidate. Very rarely do you have a debate where it's so clear who won. I mean, I remember back to that first debate, Romney versus Obama in 2012. I was working for Romney. We knew he won that debate. There was absolutely no doubt in our minds, no doubt in anyone else's minds. Those debates are rare. More often than not, you do get kind of a mixed bag, and it's up to the campaign to go out there and spin it however they want to spin it to create the narrative that they want to going into the days after the debate.
At least in the first few hours after the debate, Lanhee, a lot of the media latched on to Chris Wallace's question asking President Trump to condemn far right-wing militia groups and some of their violent activities. And he didn't. He said that they should stand down but stand by. It would seem that those words could live in a certain amount of infamy.
Yeah, I thought that moment was very unfortunate for the president. And again, his inability to directly condemn white supremacy, his inability to directly go after that, I do think that hurts him with a number of different demographics, but it also just contributes to this notion that he's unwilling to critique these groups that really are there's nothing redeeming about them, right? And so his inability to condemn them, I think, is a problem. Biden had I won't say similar, he had his own issue with Antifa and not being able to sort of directly criticize Antifa. There's no equivalence there necessarily. It's just to say that each side, again, will be able to latch onto something where they felt there was a moment that the candidate simply did not do enough, whether it was not enough to condemn white supremacy or not enough to condemn this far-left movement that arguably is causing some violence in some American cities.
Do you think that the first debate is generally more important than the second and third debates? Was that Trump's best opportunity to get back in the game?
I think viewership generally does tend to plateau or decline a little bit after that first debate. And, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And in that sense, I do think tonight's debate was important. I question, though, gentlemen, whether there will be another debate after tonight. I really don't know if either side feels like they got a lot out of it, if they feel like they want to get into another one of these fights. Maybe the Trump people are fine because the more confrontations they have, the better. But I have a tough time seeing how Vice President Biden's team wants any more of this. It just wasn't productive for them, and it wasn't particularly productive for the American people.
That's a remarkable suggestion, Lanhee. Is there a mechanism for that? Because as I understood it, they've both signed up to 3 presidential debates, 1 vice presidential debate with the Debates Commission. It's not up to them anymore, is it?
Well, I mean, Biden could take a hit by saying he doesn't want to show up anymore, that he doesn't think it's useful. Of course, then that becomes a campaign issue. Fundamentally, I don't know that either side saw a whole lot in tonight's debate where they say, yeah, I want to come back and do that again. Or, yeah, I feel like Americans have a much more positive impression of me because of tonight's debate. So in that sense, maybe they mutually agree to do it. But maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe I'm just hoping that they don't have any more debates so I don't have to watch them.
President Trump, as he often did in his primary debates as well 4 years ago, he tangled with the moderator Chris Wallace, who really struggled to try and keep particularly President Trump to stick to the rules of allowing 2 minutes for the other guy to talk and so on. Should there be a mute button? Should there be a way of silencing in those moments of agreed silence, silencing the other candidate?
Yeah, I argued that on Twitter, actually, that there should be a mute button for the moderator because I thought Chris Wallace did the best job he could under the circumstances. It's very difficult to moderate a debate like this when, essentially one candidate's decided he's not going to pay attention to the rules and the other candidate has to follow suit because, what are you going to do in that circumstance? So I think it would have been great if you could have just cut off someone's mic. And in a lot of the primary debates that the media organizations host, they do have that capacity, essentially to cut off mics from the control room. I think giving the moderator a little bit more power to control the discussion by enforcing the rules would be great. But under the circumstances, I think Wallace did the best he could.
Well, Lanhee Chen, it's clear from your demeanour you didn't particularly enjoy this debate, but we enjoyed talking to you about it. Thank you for your time once again.
Thanks for having me.
The Republicans have abused our trust.
If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election.
They've violated sacred norms.
The Senate will vote on this nomination this year.
But the Democrats are fighting back.
This is not fair. This is wrong.
Not settling for second best.
The Democrats are going to do everything we can to fight back to ensure that he doesn't steal another seat.
They're going to look Republicans in the eye and say,
I have great respect for a number of my Republican colleagues, and I'm hoping they will do the right thing.
Please don't be mean to us.
I'm saddened for my Republican colleagues.
Come on, this is no fair. We're counting to 3. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. The Democrats. I'll be your best friend.
This week, President Trump did announce his nominee to fill the Supreme Court vacancy created by the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is 48-year-old federal court judge and former law professor Amy Coney Barrett. And this is how she describes her judicial philosophy.
A judge must apply the law as written. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside any policy views they might hold.
So she says, but Democrats fear if the devout Catholic conservative and mother of 7 is confirmed, she would wind back women's reproductive rights.
In 2003, she suggested that a key Supreme Court decision upholding Roe v. Wade and a right to abortion was wrongly decided. If she's confirmed, the court would be more likely to uphold efforts by the states to restrict access to abortion.
The Republican-dominated Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to start hearings on Monday the 12th of October. They will last just 4 days between opening statements, questions and testimony from outside witnesses. And among the Democratic senators quizzing Judge Barrett will be Kamala Harris, just days after her vice presidential debate with Mike Pence. Senator Harris says Trump's Supreme Court nominee is being put on the court for 2 things: scrap Roe v. Wade and the Affordable Care Act.
If nothing else, the voters should be very clear about one thing. President Trump and his party and Judge Barrett will overturn the Affordable Care Act, and they won't stop there. They have made clear that they want to overturn Roe versus Wade and restrict reproductive rights and freedoms.
So Democrats are trying really hard to make this a healthcare and abortion choice fight, not a fight over Amy Coney Barrett herself, which is probably smart given what happened over the whole Brett Kavanaugh thing a while back.
Yeah, and also given what happened when Amy Barrett was confirmed to the 7th Circuit Court as well in 2017. Some felt Democrats attacked her religious beliefs at the time, and the Dems definitely want to lay off the Catholics because the Catholics support Biden 53% to 41% at the moment.
And he'd only be the second Catholic president, technically, after JFK, so he's in with that crowd.
Exactly. Now, some have noted that out of many polls, when asked whether Ginsburg's seat should be filled now or by the winner of the election, 52% of people say to wait. Only 39% say fill it now. But the Dems might not want to make that their argument either, because even in the polls where 56% to 36% say that Trump should wait, a much narrower 47% to 42% say the Senate should wait after Trump nominates someone, which he has. Also, even though it's close, there just aren't as many people out there who regard the Supreme Court as their top voting issue anyway. Whereas, by contrast, 57% of voters support Obamacare, including nearly 2/3 of independents, and it's generally quite broad support as well. Furthermore, literally a week after the election, the Supreme Court's going to be hearing a case that could see Obamacare torn to shreds. So as an issue, it's got real salience. Now that is why Chuck Schumer is being anything but subtle, writing to Democrats, "We must focus like a laser on healthcare. Healthcare remains the best way to keep the pressure up." Strangely, Trump is helping them do that by tweeting out things like, "Obamacare will be replaced with a much better and far cheaper alternative if it's terminated by the Supreme Court." Interesting strategy, that. To Trump's credit, he has tried to sell a plan to replace Obamacare with something better. The only problem is it isn't actually a plan. It's more like an aspiration. This is literally the kind of detail you find in this executive order. It has been and will continue to be the policy of the United States to give Americans seeking healthcare more choice, lower costs and better care, and to ensure that Americans with pre-existing conditions can obtain the insurance of their choice at affordable rates. Oh, and also 3 secretaries shall maintain and build upon existing actions to expand access to and options for affordable healthcare. Not a lot of detail there, John. Maybe I was overly generous calling that a plan. Rather, it's more like an attempt to bluff people who don't read executive orders.
Yeah, details. We'll flesh it out later. Trust us. Now, Donald Trump has been promising to release his tax return since long before he even started running for president.
If I decide to run for office, I'll produce my tax returns, absolutely, and I would love to do that.
Every presidential candidate for the last 50 years has released their tax returns. And in 2016, Trump said, sure, it's on its way.
But I have one of the world's most complicated tax returns. It's a massive return, and but I will get it done as soon as I can.
We appreciate the effort, but then...
I will absolutely give my return, but I'm being audited now for 2 or 3 years, so I can't do it until the audit is finished, obviously. While I'm under audit, I'm not going to release my tax returns. No lawyer would let you do that.
What a shame. Actually, tax lawyers said being under audit didn't stop Trump releasing any of those documents. Still, after the election was out of the way, he took another approach.
You know, the only one that cares about my tax returns are the reporters, okay? They're the only ones. But no, I don't think so. I won. I mean, I became president. No, I don't think they care at all.
Well, this week we finally saw why Trump was under audit in the first place and probably why he didn't want us to see those tax returns.
The Times reporting the president paid just $750 in taxes in 2016 and again in his first year in office. In 10 out of the 15 years before that, he reportedly paid no taxes at all because he reported losing more money than he made.
$750 in tax in a bad year? Well, we learned from the Times as well what this audit is about. $72.9 million in a tax refund that Trump got after declaring a giant financial loss, may be related to the failure of those Atlantic City casinos, and he may have to pay it all back again because he held onto a 5% stake in the new casino company that emerged. You're not meant to do that. It turns out, though, when The Apprentice TV show was a big hit in the early 2000s, Trump was raking in the moolah. Getting a sweet 50% slice of all the profits, he went on a spending spree buying 10 golf courses, but like his casinos, they weren't a great business. And Trump, it seems, turns out to have a tremendous talent for one thing: losing money. In 20 years, he has lost more than $315 million on his golf properties alone. His Washington, D.C. hotel has already lost $55 million since opening in 2016. And Trump's business and personal interests are so intertwined, he gets deductions for everything from his private jet to his hairstyling. $70,000 worth of hairspray. His kids get paid tax-deductible consulting fees at the same time as they're employed by the Trump Corporation. Trump's most successful property, though, is undoubtedly himself. Through that TV show and licensing his name and image to Trump-branded ventures right around the world, he made $427.4 million. Tally that all up, and the Times says Trump paid about $400 million less in federal tax than a comparable very wealthy person would have paid on average. But while these disclosures show Trump's image of extraordinary wealth and success that helped to make him both famous and president are largely a mirage, the real problem for Trump could be this: he's financed all of that debt by borrowing large amounts of money. And those loans still need to be paid back. He has a $100 million mortgage on Trump Tower. That's due in 2022. He may have to repay that tax refund, which with interest would now be another $100 million. All Up the Times says President Trump appears to be responsible for loans, personally responsible that is, totaling $421 million, and most of those are due in the next 4 years. But as far as President Trump is concerned, that is all just
fake news.
But of course, Jazz, there's one way to clear this all up pretty quickly: release your taxes. In fact, let's let this very wise fellow have the final word on that.
The president should come clean. He should have come clean over the years.
When you're right, Chaz.
That guy there should run for president.
Should he though? Should he really?
Look, everyone's having fun with Trump not paying his income taxes, but I don't think that's necessarily the issue here. Firstly, people don't pay taxes when they don't make money. And these are Trump's net gains and losses over the last 20 years. Pretty slim pickings for the last 7 years there. So if those numbers are correct, then Trump paying no taxes is just how the tax code works. Also, talking about how the tax code works, in America, rich people sometimes have to pay a parallel tax called an alternative minimum tax when they use huge deductions to otherwise wipe out their tax liabilities. And the New York Times has openly noted that in 7 years, between 2000 and 2017, Trump paid $24 million in alternative minimum tax. So, what years were they? Were they the years that he paid zero or not much income tax? The New York Times doesn't say. So, has this story been misreported? I don't actually know. We don't have enough information to be sure. But I just thought I'd flag that because no one else is. Besides, like I said, I don't think his income taxes are the main issue anyway. That is assuming he isn't cheating his taxes, because remember those statements the New York Times saw are his statements. He could be lying to the IRS for all we know. But if he's being honest, to me, the biggest issue is that Trump seems to be depending more and more on businesses that create conflicts of interest with his job as president, like the $5 million a year that Trump made from extra sign-ups at Mar-a-Lago, or the millions of dollars he made from projects in foreign countries. This week, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington put out a new report in which they detailed 3,400 conflicts of interest for Trump just since he took office alone, including 141 members of Congress staying at his properties, as well as 130 special interest groups, 88 political group events, and 145 foreign officials visiting all at his properties. And the biggest conflict of interest is that $421 million he owes that John referred to over the next few years. Now, contrary to what some people are saying, we do actually know who he owes that money to from other Trump forms. It's mostly two companies, Deutsche Bank and a group called Ladder Capital. What we don't know is anything else about the nature of where Trump gets his money from and the conditions of his debts. And that is because congressional oversight of Trump's finances has been pathetic. And that is a worry. Now, maybe we might find out more soon, because the New York Times promises more articles over the coming weeks, probably all the way to the election, I expect. They've stitched him up good and proper.
Before we go, a quick check of this week's poll position. And heading into today's first debate, Joe Biden's consistent lead in the national polls of around 7 points was holding pretty steady, although within that there is a bit of variation. A 10-point lead to Biden in the ABC News Washington Post poll, down to just 4 points in an Emerson poll. Biden's lead in the battleground state averages is smaller but also doggedly consistent. He leads Trump by more than 5 points in the 3 Rust Belt states that swung the last election to Trump: Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. Arizona is a 3-point race. Florida and North Carolina basically toss-ups there. But again, Biden's lead is worryingly steady as far as Trump's concerned. The president remains just in front in Georgia. Republicans getting worried about holding on to Ohio. Their play for New Hampshire is falling short. Iowa went for Obama in 2008 but has been increasingly Republican for the last decade. Yet it's tied up this week. Democrats are holding on to a lead in Nevada, which Trump had in his sights, and in turn they're forcing Trump to defend Texas, which would be a huge upset if Democrats won that. Trump is looking for a huge comeback in the final 5 weeks of this campaign. The Electoral College has Biden winning comfortably again this week, Chaz.
And interestingly, the polls have now blown out to the point that even if exactly the same polling errors occurred in every single state that occurred back in 2016, Biden would still win the election.
Interesting. But that's all for Planet America this week. We'll see you back here at the same time next Wednesday night.
And we'll be having a fireside chat on Friday night on ABC News. See you then.
Good night.